Good to see you.
Doing good. Always nice to come up more. It's always nice to come up more.
Yeah.
Did you never pay WWC here? Try our way.
Back and circle up.
Now we made it a circle.
Yeah.
2:32. We're 2 minutes late. Sorry about that. We had to close the room because the other rooms are a little louder, so with fans and stuff. So I think just about everybody, Alan, and with the area labor council. Let's do quick introductions, and then we'll have a conversation with our governor, lieutenant governor. Go ahead.
Andy Campbell, Local 11 Plumbers and Steam Fitters.
Kurt Olson, I'm with the International Union of Allied Trades and Duluth Blade Trades.
Chris Thacker at the Labor Union.
Brad Zacher,
Ron Alston, active Teamster, Secretary Treasurer.
Jack Radzak, Teamster. Derek Peterson, Labor.
Jeff Olson, Teamster.
Chad Moore, Teamster.
Back there.
Tom Savard, UFCW, and President of the Iron Range Labor Assembly.
Go back
Mike
there.
Barrett, Local 49 Operations Engineers.
Channel County, everyone.
Derek Carlson, IBW 242.
Beth McCuskey, DFP. Stacy Specs at Steelworkers 90/60.
Gary Morgan, UFW 1189 Duluth.
Don Smith, Electrical Workers, Local 242.
Glenn Walz.
Admin, Tim Walz, admin.
Peggy Flanagan.
Well, I think we just want to have some conversation, right? So,
First of all, we want to say thank you to all of you. Thanks for the work you do. Thanks for organizing to protect all workers. Thanks for understanding the importance of the labor movement and how it built the middle class in this country. And I think there's an awful lot of folks living off the work of a lot of folks who fought for these rights for many years. And it's always good for me, as someone myself who understands the importance of organized labor, the importance of the dignity in those workplaces, the importance of recruiting and retaining that workforce that we need. Teachers, laborers, painters across the board in here, so thank you for that. And on behalf of Peggy, myself, my wife Quinn, thank you for the personal support for what we're doing. We are grateful for that. We are proud to stand with you, and also to let you know we understand our responsibility, what comes in this election. This election has been very clear that the first things that will go, we saw in Iowa, is your right to collectively bargain. The next things that goes is a living wage. The next things that goes is dignified retirement. And as we all know after that, we're stronger together. We negotiate when we're together, otherwise we beg for what we're going to get. And that is not the world we want to see. That's not the Minnesota we believe in. And we knew this campaign all along would be an opportunity to take a message to the primary voters in this case, but more importantly to all across Minnesota. The idea of building a state that values work, building a state that values its citizens and invests in them, whether it be through education for your children that are out there, whether it be that right to collectively bargain to build those strong wages, where it be giving a handle on the high cost of health care to make sure that people can live as dignified and as full of life as they can, but understanding economically, it really makes great sense for our economy if our people are healthy, well-trained, and ready to work. Those are the things that make a difference. So we just wanted to get the opportunity to talk to you as we move forward. Most Minnesotans are now just going to start listening to what's coming. This election is critically important. You saw another legislative session that I think Peggy can speak a little more clearly on. That was not only, other than the one success story on the pensions that we're glad to see happen, and the pension bill was one, we saw a lot of missed opportunities that happened because of a politic that has become small, a politic that has become divisive, and we believe that this is the ticket, and I think the support we receive from you is a ticket that can reflect all of Minnesota, one that rejects these narratives that we're a greater Minnesota versus the Twin Cities, one that rejects this narrative that we've got to find these little political factions. And so this campaign is far more than just electing a governor. That's really important. I think this is the campaign, and we knew it from the beginning, that lets us take labor's story to a broader audience, that lets us talk to our neighbors, that lets us understand when Electrolux closes and we lose machinist jobs in St. Cloud, that has a negative impact throughout the economy, that the neighbors need to know why we should be fighting so hard to make sure that doesn't impact us. So I am just grateful. It's a great opportunity for both Gwen and I to say thank you to you, to answer any of your questions or hear from you, whether it be campaign related or more specifically about ideas for Minnesota. So glad to be here with my partner in justice, Peggy Flanagan. So.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm Peggy Flanagan. I'm a state representative from St. Louis Park. I've been there for 2 terms. Prior to that, I worked for Children's Defense Fund, where I was the executive director there and led a coalition along with many friends in this room to increase the minimum wage to $9.50 and index it to inflation. We got more work to do, but we see what happens when labor, faith, and nonprofit communities can come together and I'm eager to build on that work going forward. I feel really at home and comfortable in this room with a picture of Senator Wellstone behind us. I first got my start in electoral politics. I was going to be an early childhood special education teacher, and then my senior year of college, I volunteered for Hall, and that changed everything for me. And so I got bit by this organizing bug, and I work for Wellstone Action for almost a week. So I am just grateful for our friendships with folks up here and for the opportunity to just continue to build on this. And that's actually where I first met Congressman Walz. He was one of my campers when I was a trainer at Camp Wellstone. And he came in and was wearing jeans and a t-shirt and said, I want to run for Congress. And we're like, who's this guy? And then by the end of the weekend, we're like, who is this guy? And I knocked on doors in southern Minnesota for Tim Walz, and we've had a really strong friendship that has only grown. We figured it could go one of 2 ways over the last 8 months that we've been working together. Either we'd be at each other's throats, or we'd still be friends. So good news is we're still working together, and are eager to figure out how we can just partner with all of you to ensure that working families have what they need all across the state. I'm a mom to a 5-year-old little girl who's getting ready to start kindergarten in the fall. So education in particular is front of mind for me in this upcoming election. So just looking forward to hearing from all of you.
I think for all of you, Peggy's right in telling you that my wife Gwen and I were educators. Gwen's still with the school district in Mankato. I'm a geography teacher from Mankato. I had no political aspirations or experience. I spent 24 years in the military, Army National Guard to end with. Came back from a deployment in support of Enduring Freedom back in 04 and decided I needed to get more engaged. I needed to do more other as I was coaching football, teaching school, National Guard, again, like many people are, but recognized that it didn't feel like a lot of us had a voice. It didn't feel like folks who were doing a lot of the things that were being impacted by decisions that were being made, we didn't have a voice in it. And that same drive that drives me now believes that as I watch things in D.C., that it's in the states where we can make the differences. It's in the states where we can innovate. It's in the states where we can make sure that we're boosting our workforce, that we're working and making sure that people have health care, because federally they're not doing it. They're not happening. And so we want to do that as governors. So Gwen and I are grateful for it. So Al, thank you.
Let me start things off. Thank you for the introductions and getting things moving here. I just wanted to say, Derek and I were delegates at the convention, as you know, and, you know, we talked about a Saturday night after some stuff was happening, and it was like, we were so disappointed that the delegates were really out of touch with what we could understand. I mean, 25% of the delegates voted against Tina Smith, for starters, and then, you know, rejected, you know, your ticket after coming off start. You know, in the 8th, we had all these fight for delegates that were never gonna ever come around to anything reasonable, really. They just, they never fight for out of them. They just, it was, I don't think they're Democrats, most of them, personally. I think they're Democratic Socialists or something else, Green Party people, but I'm really happy that you're continuing to maintain, because we have an important election that we know our future is at stake. We as a labor movement know that we're done for if Republicans win this race. We'll be like Wisconsin. Nobody wants to be like Wisconsin nowadays, not us particularly. So I don't know if you had any comments there in particular.
The support was great there. I feel like we can move in the right direction with the support alone. I mean, I follow you guys on Twitter and Facebook and all that. And it's just the people coming out and just to get your name out there. I mean, I'm gonna try to wear this shirt every day if I can. So, it's a name recognition. So.
I have that one, I'm proud of it.
We can get you a few more.
We're a band shirt, but, no, I think so, and I think commenting on this, again, things that happened in the past, I like to tell the story every chance I get. The football team I had in '99, we started out the season 2 and 4, and we won the state championship. I view things in the long run. We were always planning on running in a primary. I think we're seeing a battle here in Minnesota about those that want to create small factions. There's political paths for people when you do that, but you cannot govern. We cannot end up in these situations where we have these totally unproductive legislative sessions, or we don't get the idea. Again, you're not here based on democratic values alone. You're here based on values that build strong families, that build strong communities, that create work, that are careers that you can live on and live a dignified life and get paid fairly for the work that you put in creating the country. Those are the reasons that you're here. And I said, I think a lot of people feel a great sense of frustration of who's looking out for us, who's speaking for us, who's making the case about how we're living, and trying to find ways, again, to continuously divide us. I reject those false notions, and we've said it on this on many occasions, and I see it in southern Minnesota. Minnesotans care deeply about clean water. They care deeply about the environment. And the folks that are doing economic activities, whether it be farming, mining, or other things, they care too. And this assumption that there's somehow different camps that would be there and we can't find solutions. Peggy and I have worked hard on this. Peggy works as an Indigenous woman. The issue of wild rice is very important. We dig into these tough issues. We talk about them in a manner that is the belief that there are solutions to be found that protect our environment, that protect our jobs, that let us do the things we need to do. And I think you come to this, when you get into these political fights, the whole point is to try and figure out how you divide us apart. And I made the point that I refuse to see that map of Minnesota divided. I refuse to see us as not having common core values. And I think together, that's where we're going to talk to our neighbors.
And I see Representative Mike Sundin came to join us. Good,
Hey.
you can join us there, Mike.
Sure, good buddies.
I know.
Mike, good to see you.
I feel more comfortable now.
Yeah. But we wanted to know just from you, just a candid conversation, and one of the things that I think Peggy and I are known for is transparency and openness. We wanted to make sure media is here is how we talk about these things. What's on the minds of folks up here? What are they talking about? Now they're going to start paying attention. We're 5 months out from an election, a general election. What are they? We hear this all the time. We're up here, people like the big issues that are dividing us. Nobody's talking about big international issues. They're talking about how do they get child care for their kids? How do they make sure as they watch their rising premiums? We're lucky if we're in organized labor, we negotiate, we've got good health care. That's a piece, and be very clear, we negotiated for that. We negotiated away wages to have those things. But what are you hearing? What are the folks out there telling you? What do they want to know that's going to happen? What do they need to see out of the next governor?
Well, I'm the president of Local 346. We have what I'm told the largest pipeline local for the kids using the pipeline. So pipeline's huge for us. So I can't get the pipeline built. What's your guys' position on the pipeline like that, line 3, vetoing it in the future of line 3? What's your guys' position on the pipelines?
Yeah, and the thing, first of all, and I think it's important to understand, being federally, I have voted for pipelines, and I have voted against pipelines. And I voted on them on their merit. Are they able to read the environmental impact statements? The same thing that you want to see. You're going to build one that endangers this. You don't want to build that. Do we have the places in place, and are we working cooperatively with our partners? And the issue here is one of the things, of course, tribal sovereignty that comes in, and it's no secret about this. Peggy, as an Indigenous woman, has thoughts on how we do that. We've taken it from the beginning that if this pipeline can be built safely, if it includes the meaningful consultation with our sovereign nations, and we do the things that need to be done on the environmental impact statements, we can build pipelines, and we should build pipelines because they transport things that if we're transporting above ground, more dangerous, more expensive. We understand and have worked really hard moving towards a clean energy economy, but it's naive to not think that we don't need to transition to that economy and move through, and much of that's moving through pipelines. So our position has been, put the processes in place, do the environmental impact statements, work meaningful in consultation with our sovereign nations to make sure that there's going to be that consultation, and we're not going to build without those consultations in our tribal nations, and get a route that works.
That's consistently been, been
From
our
the beginning.
position from the beginning.
From the beginning. And I think, to be clear about this, just to be, you're gonna hear statements, and my guess would be that Republicans who come up here, they're gonna be for pipelines and they're gonna be for mining. They're not gonna be for the folks that lay the pipeline, they're not gonna be for the miners. And you get put in a hellish position about who's gonna support us on our labor rights, who's gonna support us in our families, who's gonna support us in our schools, but who's gonna support us on projects. And Peggy and I have rejected that notion. If you do this right, you build the coalitions on the front end, you talk about how you do these things safely and include everyone in them, those are the ways that you're able to do these things. And pipelines need to be built. I mean, I've been at events where candidates running for governor have said we need no pipelines. There's 2.4 million miles of pipelines in this country. They age out, things need to be done. They move everything from natural gas to water to petroleum to everything else. But the idea to reject in principle that we're going to build infrastructure or we're going to need infrastructure is something that we've rejected. And we reject this notion that you just build them wherever the heck you want. You don't consult with anybody. The one thing I know is the professionals who build these things are the most consistent about making sure we have to get this right. It has to be done right. It has to be in place right. That's why you hire the professionals.
Exactly. Yeah, but like I said, we're pipeline, they might mess us up. They have. The problem is, 2 weeks ago, you had Kurt Dowd sitting over there at Clyde Iron banging his fist. I'm here for labor. I'm here for the working man. I think anybody sitting in this room knows Kurt Dowd gets first one to withdraw prevailing wage and
Correct.
everything else. So, and I think the message needs to get out to the labor department that, Democrats are on the side, because I believe as Al said it, our party has been hijacked. Our party has been hijacked. There's no more DFL. The labor's no longer in the DFL. And I think we need somebody that's going to bang this on the table and say, we need labor back. And to do that, in northern Minnesota, and the 8th district, you have to show strong support for mines, but pipelines too, because there's a lot of pipeliners that work all over the country that reside right here in northern Minnesota.
No, that's right. And I know with us having the construction trades, and we made it very early on. I'm proud of my environmental record, as you are too. Peggy's proud of hers. I think this partnership together of us understanding, we need to bring the folks together to not allow them to do this to it, to not allow us to split on this. Because again, your members are in that hellish position. What do we go for? One says they want to let us do this, but they're going to take away our rights and we're not going to get paid for doing it. The other one's making it feels like it's harder to get it done, but they support our rights. And I think that's why this is the ticket that reflects best that position. And I'm proud of this. I've been able to figure out how to do that in Congress. Peggy's been able to figure out how to do it in the state legislature. And I found it so interesting when we were first up north of Peggy talking to folks about these are bread and butter issues in their families. And that's the way you need to view it, through that lens.
I think one of the first votes that I ever took when I was in the legislature was on extending unemployment benefits for folks up here in the range. And there was a line in the legislation that some of my colleagues had trouble with, mining forever, and was language there. And I said, listen, and they gave me a hard time for voting for that bill. But let me tell you, I'm a kid who grew up with a different colored lunch ticket, right? It was on free and reduced price lunch. When I was coming up with a single mom, and at times, my mom would eat dinner, and it wasn't until I grew up that I realized it's because there wasn't any food in the house, right? She said, "Oh, I wasn't hungry." We went to the food shop. And my mom is a tough lady and a hard-working lady. So when it came down to that decision, that's a no-brainer. We need to start with thinking about talking about the environment versus labor versus, it's a false choice. We actually have to talk about people want to live where they live and take care of their families, and that's where we should start. So, you know, that is my commitment to you, that is the lens through which I see my world and the way that we work together.
Let me also tell you a funny story. So when Peggy came around, I don't know, a while ago, and I said, well, Peggy, some people in the military think you're against mining. And I said, they just think you're one of Leduc. You all look the same, you know. So it's like, yeah, she's not one of Leduc,
right?
okay? And, you know, she has the same position Tim does. She could be helpful in talking to tribal people about making things happen. Because, you know, it is a wheeling and dealing and negotiations and how you get these things done. And Peggy can be helpful with that. But it was, you know, one of those
We're
things.
both from White Earth, but I do think that's important, right? In the same way, I think that, you know, you're talking about labor feeling shut out or not listened to. Tribes have certainly felt that way too, and you know, I think for many of us, we want to do things with people, right? We don't want things done to us. We like to do them in partnership and with people, and I think that's again that common ground and that place to start.
That's why this ticket looks different, sounds different, and I hope that, again, we're just, a lot of folks just getting introduced to who we are and why we got into this and how we get it done. But I'm a believer in, as Peggy said, I think as a teacher and a sergeant major, I believe in the potential of people. I believe in the optimistic future that we can get to. I'm not naive, but I've watched people capitalize on figuring out how you divide people, and that's the way they try and get things done. That is a low percentage game in the long run. And again, your folks want to work. They want to be proud that they built this country. They want to be paid a living wage, and they want to protect the environment. All of those things can be done. And we're caring people. Spencer, is your phone okay?
Yeah.
My Republican tracker's phone dropped, and I'm worried it got broken. So.
Spend a lot of time with Spencer, everybody.
Sure you didn't throw it?
Question, I live right on the range. Okay, the presidential election should have been a wake-up call for us. When you look at Hibbing and Virginia switching to Trump. I'd have never thought that in my lifetime. A lot of it's over the mining. Polymeth is the big issue.
Sure.
The Iron Range mining for taconite is there, it'll always be there. But this one has to get done. The
Yes.
second question I got for you, if you become the governor, what are you gonna do with, we represent the United Food Commercial Workers, a lot of people that work in the nursing homes.
Yes.
They're working short-staffed, they are underpaid.
Yes.
They can't seem to get people. We were talking today, Gary and I, how do you file a grievance when they're working short-staffed?
That's right. Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, well, we're gonna work with experts who know, that's your people. My mother has been, after my father died, she went back and retrained and went into, worked in a long-term care facility well into her 70s. This is tough work, it's important work. We've seen what happens in Minnesota without regulation of what's happened in some of these places. That's not on the workers, that's what happens when you get a situation where you don't have a well-qualified workforce, where you don't have labor that's there to make sure that the safeguards are in place, that the fair working conditions, the fair wages. And I think for all of us to make an emphasis on this, this is one that all Minnesotans care deeply about, and it's a crisis situation. How do we get the right people in there? So as governor, we're going to make sure, first and foremost, in this legislative session, it did not happen, of making sure that oversight is provided. And what it does is that allows us to elevate this discussion to the point of who these quality people are. How do we make sure that we're paying them what they need to be paid? How do we make sure, again, that reimbursement rates are able to do that, but that Minnesotans care about this? Because right now, I don't think a lot of folks recognize the number of people, and in southern Minnesota, it's about 75%. Medicaid pays for about 75% of what's in southern Minnesota. They don't realize how hard it is to find and retain quality workforce, which you're trying to do. And I think as governor, having that conversation with Minnesotans, elevating it to being something that is important to them, and then starting to bring in the folks who can help solve this. What do we do to make sure that your folks are able to be brought in and retained, and you can be a part of that conversation?
And I think, you know, this is just one example of where we need to make sure that we win back the House. You know, your representative from right up here in Duluth, Liz Olson, was a champion in particular on this elder care and abuse work. Republicans want another task force. Representative Sundin can tell you we got a lot of forces in the legislature when we actually know what to do. And so I think that's why it's going to be so important that as we're traveling across the state, that winning back the House is part of something that's really important to us, and ensuring that there's folks who share our values who are elected so that we can move these things forward. The other thing I would say, I think that, Donald Trump was the wrong answer, right? We've heard this, he's the wrong answer to the right question about people feeling, like they need to be able to provide for their families, feeling, uncertain about their future. And that's where our job is to make sure that we are, we're having conversations with folks all across the state, regardless of where they are, so that they can see themselves reflected in us, in our leadership, and can really feel that trust again in what we want to try to do in the state.
The president will be here next week. They'll get an opportunity to be up here on the range, talking to folks, and I think Peggy's right. I listen to my neighbors when they speak on this. Tens of thousands of them voted for President Trump and me in southern Minnesota, not because our politics were the same, but because they believed that we were both on their side for some reason. I agree with Peggy. I think that was the wrong choice, and they're seeing that now. But I don't think we disregard that, of making the case. And the president resonated on some of those issues that they felt like they were left out. And as Al said, I think you go and you gather at the convention. There's a lot of folks there that felt like they were being left out of the convention, and because of where the beliefs were about how do you make sure that labor and the economic piece for families is at the center of the discussions we're having. How do we make that be the case? How do we understand that there's different parts of the state have different needs that need to be delivered, that they're not all created the same in terms of what's it going to take to make sure local government aids to those communities are doing what they need to do. We saw in the, having the bonding bill, we should be building a lot more roads up here. We've got work to do. That's not going to happen because of that. That has to be fixed, and we have got to talk to people where they live about how to bring them in. So you'll hear that conversation up here next week, and your members will hear that conversation. And this race for governor, we need to be very clear. I think you're right about this. Someone needs to lay down the line and say that we're going to be there for these working families. We're going to be there for labor. We're going to be there and make sure that these projects can be done. They should be done if they're done safely, responsibly, and in collaboration with folks. And that shouldn't be that hard. It's what we've always done. Down in my neck of the woods, I saw some Republicans are now starting to call themselves the Republican Farmer Labor Party, trying to take that in. And I've always said I refuse to cede the farmer labor part of this. I refuse to cede that what we can do together with farmer labor, with greater Minnesota, makes the entire state stronger.
So Tim, you and I had this discussion, and by the way, as an officer of the Minnesota State Legislature, I'm proud to endorse you, because you know you got that endorsement.
Thank you.
But, the mining, Tom touched on it a little bit.
Yeah.
When the range does good, Duluth does good, vice versa. Our members in the trades, we work the range, we work Duluth, we travel.
That's right.
Nothing to travel 100 miles one way to work in the trades. So we need to somehow let, like Tom said, when the range voted for Trump,
Get up there and let
what
them
did we
know.
do wrong? But our members are just tired of being told, no, no, no.
That's right.
We can't mine, we can't do this.
That's right.
That's our livelihoods. How do we, circle back and make sure that, Plenty was here, yesterday or was it over the weekend.
Didn't invite me, I guess.
Yeah, but, mining, absolutely.
It'll be for mining, not the miner.
Absolutely.
We need to give your members the opportunity to vote for someone who they know supports responsible projects and also supports their right to collectively bargain. That's the place they always wanted to be. That's the place we were at one point in time, where we're able to have somebody come in here, champion your issues, and not divide you out. I take great offense to this, as I think you should. You care about clean water. You care about safety and environmental standards. In fact, you're well versed in it. It's what you do. You have to do it to do the work you do. We need to make sure that your members know they don't have a false choice, that we can do this. We can have the safeguards in place. We can build these projects. And I've said, I've been all along on PolyMet, follow the science, do the environmental impact statements, do the permitting process, put the liability in place, and then if all that works, then go for it. And it's why I voted for the land swap, and it was the right thing to do over a year ago to get this thing done. And now you're seeing that become an issue of conflating, and you saw it on the floor. I've served 12 years in a very divided Congress. I've served 12 years in the 9th largest agricultural district in America, and I still have a 97% voting record with the League of Conservation Voters, and the ag community supported me. The idea is that they hate this when they can't split you off that you find common ground to bring people together. So I think the question you're making is we have to go to your members and tell them, you don't have to make a false choice on this. And you don't have to, you can look anybody in the eye and say, of course I defend the boundary waters. Because my guess is most of your members have spent a lot more time there than anybody else. Those are the things that message got mixed. So you're right. Governor Paulino will come up and tell you he's for mining. But he also said a few months ago his unfinished business was right to work. So that's his first. You can be sure that you will have right to work before you have a mine permit. You can guarantee that.
And I think Beth's gonna say something, but the Polymote's been 20 years, I think they've been working on
Yes.
it. 20
Some
years.
all down, close,
Yeah.
hundreds of millions.
You mentioned right to work, any day now, some of us are waiting for
Yes.
the Supreme Court, Janice,
That's right.
decision. We don't anticipate thank you, favorable decision, so, you wanna explain your,
Yes.
collective bargaining background and, what you plan for the state, please?
Yes, Gwen and I come from teaching families, both her parents, two of her three sisters.
We come from labor
We
families.
kill labor, but public education, labor education, my father, both my brothers and my sister, and most of their spouses. We understand that right to collectively bargain is what built the profession, that provides quality teachers, that retains them, that gets outcomes for our students, that allows them to live their life. That's where that's at. I've been very clear about this. This will be our first opportunity to put not only a labor governor, but a teacher in that office. I think Janice will come down. We have a Supreme Court that we know how that all worked out when we had an opening and President Obama was denied that opportunity, so they did what they're going to do. Here's the way I view this and what I say. This is a challenge to us, but inside of every challenge comes an opportunity. All of you in this room know this. This is your moment. This is labor's organizing moment. What we're gonna have to do is, Janice will make it more difficult. It will tilt the playing field in towards special interests and everything else, but it does not stop us from going out and making our case to our members to go out and work. And I think from that perspective, at this point in time, each of you are already thinking about this, the public sector side, especially because of the impact it's going to come, but we're all in this together. This is the rebirth of the time to go back out. Odds have been stacked against us before. Odds were stacked against the giants that we stand on their shoulders of, that won labor rights in the first place. We're back at one of those points, and I think my job is to make sure that we're advocating from that governor's office of the right to collectively bargain, the right to make sure that we're educating the public of why this matters, and we turn the public support behind you, because they've just been being told, I mean, it's just, again, it's a flippant term, oh, we don't need labor anymore, whatever, we don't need that, you hear your neighbors say this or whatever, or you've got it easy or whatever. No, it's actually called the living wage. It's actually part of what we do. And I think for me as governor, and Peggy as lieutenant governor, and all of you, the Janice decision gives us an opportunity to go back to our roots, to reorganize, to get folks out to make that case. And I think we're going to have to know that has to be very, very focused. We're gonna have to go out and talk to each and every member of why this matters. Because I know this as young teachers. Young teachers would always come in and say, why am I paying dues to this or whatever? Well, so that you don't get fired for doing nothing. So if you get pregnant, you can keep your job, because in 1970, that didn't happen. And somebody stood up and walked that picket line so that you could have that. Those stories have been forgotten.
Yes.
And so I think the good news is, if you're of a certain age, unfortunately, Janice is gonna make you remember it. But the good news part about it is you're going to have a whole new generation, and I feel it out there, of labor activists. And you see it in here, we've got younger people ready to make that case. So I think that's where we're at. How are you gonna handle it up here? How are you gonna see it? What are Duluth teachers gonna do when Janice comes down?
Well, we've already been organizing for the last year.
Yeah.
We already have a commitment, and as somebody said to me, when you pay your monthly cable bill, was it you that said that?
Yeah.
You pay your monthly cable bill, you don't wear a shirt that says I love Comcast.
That's
However, when you pay your union dues, you're okay with wearing it because you believe in the right of bargaining, you
That's right.
believe in, worker safety and all that goes with it.
That's right.
Because ultimately, we believe in children, and we
Yes.
believe in potential. And if we really believe in what Paul Wellstone said, which is all means all, right, then this is the only way to get the all, right? It is the only way to do that.
But I agree that so many people have taken for granted
Yes.
all the fights that have been there, and those of us that have been through some of that need to share that story, like you said.
Yes.
Well, we looked at the number of teachers who did not vote
in the last election.
Too many.
Too many, I mean, astronomical numbers, right? Who just did not have maybe the skin in the game, or however you wanna, or felt that. And so what we're looking at is how do you help people to understand it? How do you educate people that need to have that information? Because they're busy, and they're so busy making a living and taking care of their family that sometimes it feels like you don't have time to understand or know that. That means we have to explain it differently, right? When someone doesn't learn something the first time, then we have to approach it in a different way, right? These are all teacher points. So we just have to figure out the right way to come at that, and that doesn't happen alone. That happens with great friends like all of you and teachers.
Yeah, we need the building trades on this one, because they're coming, so.
If Janice goes through, do you guys have any thoughts or on passing legislation to get it out in New York?
Yeah, and these are things we're talking, this is in conjunction with our public sector unions about what can be done from that office. And those things will have to be, it's coming. I think you're right, sooner rather than later, it sounds like they'll be coming. Yes, and I think we do push back, we do the best we can on that front of it, but I still believe the long-range win on this is by getting the public sentiment behind in such a way that it makes it impossible to do this. It's going to be a conjunction of both.
And I think we're in that moment, right, especially as the teachers, we're seeing teachers mobilize all across this country and people in the streets that we've seen images on social media, right, of just red shirts taking over the streets.
Angry apples.
That's right. Angry apples.
Angry apples.
That's right.
It is, it's a teacher spring, and for all of you in here in the building trade side of things, we're gonna need allies. They have reached, the one thing about teachers is that they'll put up with a lot, but I can feel it too. This is not a coincidence that you saw it in West Virginia, you saw it in Oklahoma, you saw it in Arizona, you saw it in St. Paul. These things are not happening by coincidence, they're happening because this is the breaking point of where they've continued to push. And again, for the average Minnesotan, this needs to be, as I think Gwen and all of us are talking about, why does this matter to their family? Why should this matter to their family if they're not a teacher? It should matter to their family because of the quality of that educator in that room, because of all the support services and all those wraparound services, because it's about providing, as Gwen was saying, is if we value everyone's children, we value that education. It matters, and it matters to the business community because one of our biggest challenges right now is a well-qualified workforce of how do we get there. So I think many times we don't make the case of why should this matter to me. We hear this a lot into opportunity gap amongst our children of color. Well, why does that matter to me if I don't have that? It matters to all of us. That's our workforce. That's the ability. It's not just a moral responsibility, it's an economic responsibility. And I think we, again, me being labor myself, did get a little taking it for granted. That we saw these things happening in the right way, and now the pushback is coming. So that's why, and again, I don't want to sugarcoat this for anybody. You look at this, Michigan, just prevailing wage issue came up, and we know where that went. Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa. This is our time. This is the place. This is labor's time, and we see our job. We understand our responsibility, but it's being part of the team with you. So when we hear these things, we hear the organizers, we're going to have to work together. But I think your point about that I take to heart on this, and I think the Sergeant Major side of me is going to do this. There comes a time when somebody has to stand in that breach, drop the hammer, and say no more. This is where that line stops. This is where we fight, and we've got a lot of folks ready to do that. And I think that moment is coming quickly.
And here in the 8th, we, probably statewide as well, but, with the building trades, education, Minnesota, UFCW, steelworkers, we're the majority of our union members endorsing, and so we're gonna get out there and get the work done, and I'm optimistic that the other unions will come along with us after the primary. We just have to do our job. Stacy, in particular, Stacy is the president of the biggest steelworker local here in the state, and it's healthcare local, not taconite, but
Right.
I don't know if you have any particular issues you want to raise.
We talked about before, but remembering that healthcare workers are cashiers, janitors.
That's right.
All that, so when it comes to things like mandatory flu vaccines, a healthcare worker isn't just a nurse, isn't just a doctor, but, mandatory vaccines for somebody who lived in Georgia, had to get vaccines because they work from home, those kind of things, the overreaching that we have.
Yeah.
Which I suppose
No,
is
that
very
was a great
important.
conversation, by the way, with us, because I think part of this, if it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a lot of village to raise a governor and lieutenant governor. And this idea of getting out and listening and hearing that, and we really appreciate that and took that to heart. So.
Yeah, I got a question and a comment.
Yeah.
Did our political director notify you that we endorsed it? Teamsters?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you looked at me.
Yeah.
We
I thought you were
did,
gonna tell me something. I'm hoping to help you.
We endorsed you a while ago. So
Yeah, no.
We're not pulling.
I was
either.
including you in the building chase.
Yeah,
And I'm kind of in a
No,
spot
thank you.
where I got a daughter that works full-time for Nolan, and now she,
Yeah.
you know, the spot I'm in, but we're backing you. I
Thank
mean,
you.
I'm personally backing you.
Thank you.
I'm stuck in the middle there, but
I know.
I'm not, you know,
These
not
are-
gonna waver on it.
No, I appreciate that, and I think the lesson, again, which I'll express personally and for us to support, because I know what goes into these endorsements, the blood, sweat, and tears that goes with this. But the one thing is for me personally, I think this comes from being labor, being an enlisted guy in the military for so many years. The one thing I think's been missing in our politics and that you embody is there's gotta be something about loyalty. There's gotta be something about standing with folks. There's gotta be something about keeping your word in the midst of all this, and I think I got into this business kind of based on that, not naively. I don't want to play that, you're naive on this, but I do say this, that last week after the convention, when I called through all 19 of those unions, that phone never wavered once, and everybody said, when we give our word, we give our word. I think it's very important in this space that Peggy and I certainly reflect that same thing. When we give you our word, we give you our word, and working on this, and know that we believe we're the team that can bridge some of those gaps. We're the teams that believes that we have projects that are safe and should go forward. Let's get them done, and let's get the will of the people behind us in the state so that they don't. Watching last weekend become a fight between labor and environmentalists, that is not a helpful place for anyone, nor does it solve any problems. And I know that our job is to fix that.
Well, you need the 8th, we're gonna have a big turnout because of what's going on in the 8th.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
So hopefully that'll.
We'll do what we're gonna do. We've got the resources. What we tell you, and I say we say publicly in front of folks, is that collaboratively working together, because again, this is not about us. This is not about our agenda. This is about Minnesota's agenda. This is about all of us together, not just two candidates. But our job needs to be very clear about providing that vision of what we're going to do, encouraging people to get on our side. We know there's a lot of folks out there that are frustrated as hell with this situation. You'll see it next weekend too, the division. And of course, you're not gonna hear about collaborative problem solving. You're gonna hear divisive stuff that comes out next week when the president visits, which I think, again, is an opportunity for us to go back to your neighbors, to go back to your members and tell them that that we can stand firmly in labor's court, firmly for collective bargaining, and firmly for economic activities that build this state. We should be proud of this. We're feeding, fueling, clothing the world, building this nation's infrastructure. That's what we were founded on. That's the stuff that the pride comes from, and that's what they want to feel again. And Minnesota's well positioned amongst any state to do that, but this governor's race will matter. It'll matter the direction.
If I may ask, what's next weekend?
So president visit.
Really?
President Trump will be here in Duluth, I believe.
Who's brother?
Really?
That's what we're hearing.
We're boycotting.
Not Brother Hava.
So, just so you know, but it's good. It's a message contrast. It's a different way of seeing the world.
You just brought up the infrastructure. Do you have anything as far as a plan to have a steady long-term funding for that?
Yeah, and let's not kid ourselves. The federal government makes up a big chunk of that, and they're, for all its fanfare. About every 3 weeks, the president did infrastructure week in DC, and then they did a press conference, and then it fizzled, and then they did a press conference, and it fizzled. And now he came out with this giant infrastructure plan that basically shifted it all to the states who have no money to do it. That's why nothing's happening. So with that being said, we're still gonna have to focus on that side of it. But here in Minnesota, there are things that we can do. And it starts first and foremost, I've said this before, we need to have an honest discussion about what it takes to fund infrastructure. One of the ways that was put in place was the gas tax. Again, our Republican trackers always love this and say, they're for the gas tax or whatever. It's a hell of a lot better than bridges falling into the river. I can tell you that, to getting these things done. So I will look my neighbors in the eye and ask them what it's gonna take to do this, and most of them are willing to get that done. That's just one piece of the puzzle. What we have to do is also fix this idea that we're pitting transit against highways in greater Minnesota. There's ways that we can make sure that they're not doing that against us. I think we're going to have a longer term plan, and I know the frustration around the proposed amendment about coming out of the general funds. I think we need to reject this idea of a false scarcity. I think we need to reject this idea that we can fund these things if we go and talk to our neighbors, create budgets that move forward. I've always thought we should have been bonding at a much higher rate, especially when interest rates were basically historically low. We should have been bonding the hell out of a lot of transportation. We can still do that in a state that has the capacity to grow, the capacity to pay this back. And then look at long-term things, infrastructure bank. There's a lot of different ideas out there, but certainly having an honest discussion about the revenues and funding them accordingly for this, because the public is supporting of infrastructure, and you saw it, and I know the temptation, and again, all friends in this room, about the idea of the amendment and using the general funds, but that's one of the things that our Republican colleagues, I think, do pit some of us against one another, and if we ever get in the situation to do that, I think that's not necessarily the way that we can get the revenue to do it, and should make the case. But the governor's job, again, like so many of these things, and the lieutenant governor's job, is to go out and build the social will to make it impossible to reject these things. I want legislators to know if they're gonna go home and they voted against funding, like gas tax, whatever it might be, I want them to know that there's gonna be hell to pay politically for doing that. Right now, there's no political peril for them. So you've got all these folks that go back home, especially in greater Minnesota, and say, oh, this didn't get done because, they were building transit or whatever. No, it didn't get done because you can't pass a bill that can get done. It didn't get done because you weren't being honest about the budgeting, where it did, what needs to happen. That's the job of the governor.
All the tradespeople in the room here realize that prevailing wage requirements on state-funded jobs, that's our lifeblood.
Yes.
That's what keeps us going. A lot of times the state will incentivize work through a tax break. Okay, and let's say you get a sales tax break in your materials for a project, they'll make the project go. But that doesn't tax prevailing wage. Would you be in favor of legislation that, this is actually state money that's they're foregoing to make this project go? Attach prevailing wage to legislation such as that. Any problem with that?
Yeah, no, I think that certainly those are things that, and I think this is important coming from Mike and with Peggy on this type of discussion. The governor's job is certainly in the executive branch to help set that goal, set those visions out there, but it's working hand in hand with the experts who are out there. And I say this as being someone who served in the legislative branch. Those are things, again, you watch this, Governor Dayton has basically been there as a backstop to veto bad stuff. That has got us nothing. And so it goes back to this, of ways that we can build coalitions, ways that we can get seats. And again, I gotta be honest with you, if our Republican colleagues were voting for good stuff, for school funding, for highways and all that, we'd be perfectly fine. That'd be good, just keep voting and get us the things, we'll sign those into law. If they're not, we need to make it politically perilous not to do that. So yeah, those types of suggestions I think they come out of there. If those are things that we can get through a legislature to get done, that's what we should be looking at.
All right, you said it.
So.
Deal, that's what we got.
You passed it too.
Those are-
How hopeful are you for the future?
The Democratic Party, I'm going on 65 winters now, Tim. Big change. I don't like where it's going. And I always told my members, and this is what you gotta remember, your jobs, your family. And I like what you say, but you can't say it both ways. And I know you got a tough road ahead of you. The environmentalists, White Earth Reservation, the Fun Select Band, they got their issues. The white middle class got their issues. I don't know how you're gonna get there. I don't know how you're gonna get there. Democrat Party, Duluth, Virginia hates Duluth, like Duluth hates Minneapolis. I don't know how you're gonna fix that.
Well, I certainly am. No, I hear you. I hear you.
I don't know, thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you guys for running, but it's a mess. seventies, eighties, we went on strike one time, 3 months, one time worked something for a nickel. It wasn't about the nickel. It wasn't about the nickel. It would hit that son of a bitch in the jaw and tell me not gonna push us. You know, you had the free cheese, the powdered milk, whatever it took, we got by. Labor's gotta grow a set again and get back at this stuff and tell them, no, we're not, like you said earlier.
Yeah,
So, thanks for running, you got a tough job ahead of you.
Nope, I hear you, and I think talking honestly like that is the conversations that need to happen. It's no secret, and Alan, they witnessed it at the convention. You got a Greater Minnesota candidate, one that they had decided already was maybe not as far as they would like to see on certain areas. Someone who said I wasn't going to abide by that because I thought there were a hell of a lot of people that couldn't go to the convention that should get a vote on this. Those things were there, but what I think the hopefulness for me is we still got more votes on that first ballot than anybody ever has. Now, that was the high water mark, but it showed the fact that there were still more people in that room that thought that way, that believed there was a way to put a team together that could solve this. And again, I'm not Pollyannish. I've been through this. There's been times where I had those teams won state championships, some of them did. There were times when I had, you know, when you're in the Army, you got a little bit more of an advantage. I could just say, do it, damn it, and it could get done. But there's a capacity in Minnesota to hear what you're saying and for folks to say, where are we gonna land? Where are we gonna go? And for them, it's not about political identity as much as it is, who do I really believe is on my side? Who do I believe is looking out for me? Who do I believe really understands where I'm coming from? And we're trying to make the case. And this is what everybody's reminding me of. If you would have asked me 12 years ago if I'd have been in elected office, I was coaching the football team, returning from a deployment. I had a little one on the way that was 3 years old. We were thinking about having another one. We're trying to figure out how to buy our first house. Those were the things that I was doing. And I said, nobody's listening to us. And we ran and won for Congress. I met Peggy and we started talking about this. We hear what you're saying. And we're fearful of this, and I've witnessed it down in Rochester. This idea that there's nothing to offer, and there was this idea that this ticket doesn't represent where we're at. The idea of your governor is to be the governor for all Minnesota, the lieutenant governor for all of Minnesota, and not take those pieces out or say this doesn't matter. And I tell you, those who tell us, quit worrying about the people who voted for Trump. And just worry about those people who vote here in these urban areas that we can go with. I worry about why those people voted for President Trump, not because I'm a Democrat. I worry about what's happening in their lives that they thought that was the right way to go. Why did they think they needed to do that? Why were they doing? Because they were concerned. They made a rational choice for them because something was not there. And I still believe deeply in this, that this still can be the place, if you work your ass off and you make right decisions, you should be able to make a decent wage. You might even be able to buy a damn boat and spend some time with your family, whatever it might be. Those are not flippant things that you say in a commercial. That's what people are trying to do. And I don't understand why it's so hard. And I see it as a teacher, in talking about that. I've been out of the classroom now for 12 years. This group of teachers is so talented, but the things that they've got to do are mind-boggling to me. And I say that as a professional educator. The thing that's being asked of them, the sense, and again, I come back to this, they're sucking the joy out of teaching, of doing that. They're sucking the joy out of doing some of the jobs you want to do. And again, some days you go to work, because you need to get the paycheck. But most of the days we go to work because it's what we do. It's how we see the world. And I don't think that's being articulated. I'm watching people divide us. I'm watching them tell us that we're out of touch where things are at. And you're, I think, saying where most of these folks are.
You tell them that you're there for the man and woman. That's what your message is going to be. That's what Washington said. I'm there for the little guy.
Yeah.
That's how he got one, in my opinion, because the members up at Ely or International Falls, whatever, you know, nowadays, it's all about me.
Yeah.
Ain't it?
Yeah.
It's all about me.
Well, and we're going to hear, because we're supporting a candidate against the DFL endorsed candidate, but you look at the statewide ticket. Statewide ticket of DFL endorsed candidates is entirely metro-based. Nobody from Greater Minnesota at all. And, you know, I'm supporting Senator Klobuchar, I'm supporting Tina Smith. They have our AFL-CIO endorsement, they're good. Nothing wrong with them. But you think that somebody from Greater Minnesota could be on the ticket, right? Didn't happen. So, somebody wants to say we should always support the DFL. We say we've seen that maybe they've gone astray and we need better candidates, and here we are. So,
I'm grateful for that, and I think Peggy and I believe that. And I think understanding and looking you in the eye, and your endorsements means you're trusting us, and it means you expect us to get something done. I gotta look you in the eye too on some of these. I don't have all the answers. What I do know is through my time is I know ways to build teams that do know. I know ways to include people. I know when I needed somebody to help me on issues I didn't, I went out and asked Peggy if she'd be part of a team together. We did that very specifically 8 months ago because we weren't gonna play the games. You know what could have happened after that first vote at the convention and everything. You know how these people think. I was like, oh, did Tim get rid of Peggy as running mate? Why would people think that that's what you would do? Is there no loyalty? Is it, but that's in a convention, that's where it's at. We know that you're looking at this differently. Yeah, you may consider yourself Democrat. My guess is that's not the first thing you describe yourself. And people talk to me, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a veteran, I'm a football coach, and my values have shaped me into that I believe this is a party that can still be the one that says, you know what, I'm standing up for that person who's working hard. I'm standing up for the person who's playing by the right reasons. Those folks, the special interests, they got plenty of people they're paying to look out for them. That is true. You don't worry, they'll be fine. They'll take care of themselves. It's the folks working hard.
Oh, you guys doing money wise.
They could use more about it, brother.
We're well positioned. We don't plan events. We never ever take for granted. We always knew we were running in a primary. I'm out on the phone. I'm hustling hard. I can tell you this. On Saturday night, I started calling right after that convention, and on Sunday I called straight through, as did Peggy. All 19 of our endorsed unions held firm, and by Sunday afternoon, the first 78 people I called who helped this campaign are all on board. No one's leaving. No one's changing. They understand what's at stake here. So we're where we need to be.
So we're right on time. Been an hour, and so we're going to give them a chance to maybe schmooze a little bit on the way out the door. But thank you all for coming and joining us today. Thank you.
Fight is beginning.
Hi, are you from around here? Yeah, but where do you live? So, all right. Well, did you find anything earth-shattering?
I mean, there's always some interesting stuff. I mean,
So, you're in a labor hall. Are you okay with being in a labor hall?
I'm perfectly fine.
Okay.
My uncle is very valuable.